What is some of the effort involved in being a physical medium or attending physical mediumship? Call out when you're ready.
Regular sitting for a long period of time and finding sitters who can devote that time.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
Not only
absolute dedication in the long term, absolutely essential and hard to find, I believe.
Thank you. Barbara?
Not a timer.
Not only finding sitters, but finding sitters with the understanding of what they're really sitting for.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, the willingness to be transformed, the willingness to be, you know, your entire being, you know, and life purpose changes. You know, it becomes a focus, a main focus of your purpose and existence in this particular life. So it's not like it's not a hobby. It's a redefinition of your being.
Beautiful.
So,
anybody else?
I would add, not getting so serious.
Yep.
There needs to be a very lighthearted, even humorous approach, a very human approach to it, because the people that we are trying to connect with were once human in their own way and have a profound sense of humor as well too. So they often are signaling to me, at least, to lighten up a little bit.
Thank you very much. And of course, one of the other efforts is getting like-minded people who actually know what you're talking about. And there aren't that many people you can discuss ectoplasm with, which is always a problem. Okay, with that context, let's now introduce August. August Goforth is the writer of two wonderful, wonderful books. Has anybody here read his book, The Risen? Yay! It's an amazing, amazing book. Highly recommend it. And I just love the name that his collective gave for people who've crossed over. We've always been looking for a name rather than spirits, but The Risen is beautiful. August, over to you. Let's put you on speaker view so that we can record you. If you'd like to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. I'm August Goforth. I live in New York City in Manhattan, the island of Manhattan. I'm also a psychotherapist with a very robust private practice here in the city. I don't mix my mediumship with my psychotherapy practice for all kinds of reasons, mainly ethical, but also problematic. So it's a challenge, which might be part of the topic of discussion, is how do we keep our mediumship lives separate from our public lives, of private from public, or do we? And how does that affect the contact that we make and are able to sustain? In my case, I keep the two separate as I can. So anonymity is very important to me. And I also look back to the old mediums of the golden era of mediumship for also not just their discipline and devotion, but also their ability not to worry about being famous or having a name for themselves or making money. So I kind of try to keep those aspects in mind around my own mediumship as well. So rather than me presenting as some kind of authority on anything, I, just like everyone else, am in various stages of development. And I would rather, I'll do say a few things, but also I just want this to be a stimulating kind of a friendly conversation amongst us, because we're sort of scientists. We are scientists in our own way. So we're exploring, we're experimenting, we're exchanging information, we're comparing data, we're seeing what works and what doesn't work, and we're all coming here with a wonderful attitude of curiosity, hopefully no fear. So what I'd like to do first is what I always do. This is sort of modeling in a way I'm going to be sitting with my own circle in a couple hours from now. And we always start out with a prayer. So I would like to share our prayer with you, and also to sort of open this circle, which we're forming right now, if that would be okay. So here's the prayer that that we always start our physical development circle with every night. We gather here now to join together for the purpose of development, to learn and communicate together in happy harmony and peace, and to help build spiritual portals between worlds. We ask our guides and guardians in spirit to watch over this place, protect this space with the highest of energies around us. We invite and welcome all those who are interested in our highest good and that of the universe, including spirits of nature and of animal beings. We ask that you make your presence and identity known in any way possible. We breathe in the spirit ether of the innermost energies of the fiery core of this planet Earth. We breathe in the spirit ether of the geological pressures of the mineral kingdoms beneath the surface of the Earth. We breathe in the spirit ether of the ebb and flow of the crash and thunder of the ocean's waves. We breathe in the spirit ether of the ever-unfolding light of the sun, the moon, and the stars of the celestial. We breathe in the spirit ether of the living energies of all plant life, germinating in the seed, sprouting from the soil, blossoming with leaves, flowers, and fruit into the light of the sun, moon, and stars. We breathe in the spirit ether of the ever-moving caress of the smallest breezes, the gathering thunder and lightning of the greatest of storms, and the billowing locomotion of the greatest winds of the north, south, east, and west. We breathe in the spirit ether of all vigorous and vibrant animal life in which we are immersed. We breathe in the spirit ether of all the seen and unseen energies that our loving friends in spirit bring to us now and in this coming hour. We leave all our concerns and worries outside this space for now, knowing that we sit in the warm and safe embrace of spirit love as we ask you to help us raise our vibration in order to link with yours. We thank you, friends in spirit, for your love, guidance, and support. Amen. Amongst many of my very old books on physical mediumship, there's one called The Mediumship of Arnold Clare, who was a physical medium in the United States in the 30s. And what I like about the book very much is that they were somehow able to retain and record a lot of what their spirit controls were saying in terms of giving instruction and guidance and support. And they spoke about the ether, which is apparently another word for spirit, which enlivens everything. And they said that there's a particular ether when we come into the room for physical development. There's a particular ether that our controls and the chemist like to draw upon as part of their chemistry towards mixing, towards ectoplasm materializations. And this spirit gave a particular process of breathing to capture the essence of the spirit ether. And it's very specific. And he said that when you breathe through your nose and you are concentrating solely on something good and sacred, like God, or as this prayer was, you're concentrating on the energies of the ocean waves, the wind of the air, the light quality of the sky, thinking about the majesty of the stars. As you are breathing in and thinking of these things, you are actually attracting that particular spirit ether into your body. And as you breathe it through your nose, the spirit said that that energy gathers in a very particular place just below the bridge of your nose. And he said, you don't have to breathe deeply and breathe very hard, just breathe in normal, but you want to sort of just concentrate that the breath sort of ends there. And then we will collect the essences of that spirit ether from where you have gathered it. And I have never come across anything like that before in any sittings or any books that I read. And so we are, as part of our experimentation, incorporating that idea into preparing ourselves when we come into the room and after we've darkened it and said the prayers. So I just wanted to pass it along as something stimulating and interesting. Not coincidentally, also what I do besides write books is I also am publishing. I have a small press, and so I'm currently publishing the works of Riley Haggerty, who is a spiritualist historian, quite an astounding writer. You may know some of his works. If you want to see more about them, you can go to my website, and there's a place there that I have set up for his books, and you can see about them. And we're currently finishing up on volume 2 of a series of books he's writing about American mediumship in early America, the late 1800s up until maybe, he puts it from 1858 to 1848 to 1958, so over 100 years. In this particular book that I'm publishing for him right now, Stuart Alexander has written the foreword for it, and I'm sure many of you know about Stuart Alexander, or may even know him. He and I go back a long way as friends. So I wanted to read a little bit about from this foreword that Stuart sent. Stuart's given me permission to read it, and so has Riley, because it directly speaks to this idea about sitting and what's getting in the way, and is it worth it? It's just a very interesting comment from someone who might be considered one of the greater physical mediums on the planet right now. This is what he says. Since the latter part of the last century, spiritualism has beyond reasonable doubt mutated into a mere shadow of its former self. Its golden years are long gone. While some readers may consider that to be a somewhat inaccurate, outlandish statement, I firmly believe that historic facts confirm its reality. One only has to reach back into its past and equate it with the state of the movement today to appreciate its sad decline. For over 100 years, quality mediumship was developed within the home circle before eventually emerging before the public. Such circles once existed in very large numbers and in fact represented the very heartbeat of the movement. They would meet regularly and sit in impassioned silence, working towards mediumistic development and cooperation with the spirit world. There was no pressure to perform, no rush to develop, and with all circle members sitting with great patience, knowing that development was in the hands of the spirit workers. Knowing also that if just one amongst them developed mediumship, then the circle as a whole would gain. As a result of great patience, often spread over a period of several years, slow but steady progress would occasionally be achieved, and contact with the spirit world would be the result. However, historic fact tells us that rather than emerging into the public spotlight, some chose to remain unknown to the outer world. These days, it is so very different. The home circle has largely been replaced by the development courses which invariably claim to release the medium within, or to strengthen the wannabe medium's contact with the spirit world. Such routes can, of course, help, advise, inform, encourage, and support, but they cannot in any way replace the home circle, which sadly, they mainly have. Now, the fact that they have done so has resulted, in my considered opinion, in the present unfortunate situation whereby potential mediums are led to believe that such courses can offer a shortcut to development. Why, one may ask, has this tutorial system of development largely replaced the one upon which the movement was largely founded and built upon, which for many years it thrived? One may also wonder if this is simply a matter of commercialism. Additionally, it is a sad fact that today many of the most highly celebrated mediums from the past are now mainly unknown to spiritualists. Mediums, in truth, should have their names indelibly stamped into the movement's very fabric, have largely been forgotten. And yet, with knowledge of who they were and the outstanding mediumship they demonstrated, contemporary mediumship could benefit enormously. By knowing something of their experiences and of their development path, a great many lessons could be learned. How sad then that contemporary spiritualism limps on, seemingly in ignorance of what could have been and what should have been its golden inheritance. So I leave you with that. to think about. So what I take from that is what we all have already, what I've heard you've expressed is the element of time and patience. And it seems what Stuart is saying is that the benefit, even if one person in the circle suddenly emerges as a medium, it's still not about that person. It's about the development of the circle, and each person gains in some kind of a way. And so he seems to be very worried that a lot of people are seeking fame and glory or recognition rather than the mediumship circles of old that were really basically hidden. And he's not kidding. There were probably tens of thousands of mediumship circles at one time here in the United States and globally in the UK as well too. So I was just wondering if anyone has any response or reaction to that, or it's for some ideas of your own, or you want to share some experiences of how it affects the circle that you're currently in. My circle has sat for 3 years, and it has been a problem, just time and effort and showing up, having the energy to sit there. I fortunately was raised in the Catholic Church tradition, and my family had to go to Mass every day as a child, and so I was very used to sitting for long periods of time, either in interesting environments or in boring environments. So I'm kind of thankful for that discipline, that I can sit for a long period of time, and I actually like sitting in the dark. But did anyone take anything from what I read, from what Stuart had to say about the decline of physical groups?
All right. Yeah, I thought that was very well said from Stuart. You know, I'm just going to speak to the development of everybody in our circle. Constantly, we're getting messages from Spirit to our circle, from our team, that there's a harmony. They keep the simple metaphors that they present to us through Vicky, and then subsequently through the knockings on the table to validate her comments, is one of harmony and the unity, and then further the development of everybody in the circle. Though I'm in the cabinet, everybody else is as well being developed. So it is not the focus is not on like my development. It's on the development as a whole. And that's something that was very clear from the very beginning when we started sitting with this particular 5 people. So since we've been sitting with this consistent group, all of our progress, so to speak, has been very progressive and very self-evident. We sit in joyous harmony and laughing and singing, and that's the focus of it. And so definitely the development of everybody. Everyone is being transformed. And they often speak of us as a whole, not just of the physical medium. They speak of us as a whole, moving forward with the team. So that's what rang true from what Stuart was. That was one of the first things that popped into my mind when you were speaking, August.
Mm-hmm.
Can I talk about the causes of decline? Would you mind
Yes.
there, August? So I'm hearing a couple causes, but the number one seems to me to be selfishness, right? Because people are looking for fame and glory. How are we preventing that from getting in now? Other reasons for decline, I'm hearing, we have a more digital age, TV, radio, that can take away some of the time that people would have sat. But the one that really gets me right away is that people were looking for fame and glory, and they would commit fraud or whatever it took to do that, and that discredited the whole movement. So how is that prevented now? Is my question.
I don't know. I would say that also the need for instant gratification is part of the challenge, because now we have all this wonderful technology that can bring us wonderful things almost instantaneously and almost perfectly, which is not human. And I've just noticed this in my own psychotherapy practice, that people have over-identified with technology to the point that they feel that they should be able to do things perfectly with the instant perfection that technology brings us, instead of realizing that we're nature. We're like trees and clouds and things we plant in the garden. Things take time. And what we're doing in these circles is we are planting seeds in the dark, and then we are trying to nourish them in all kinds of ways, and supplement them in ways so they'll nourish us back. And that's a very different departure from anything that technology normally would bring us. We've been able to bring a little bit of technology into the seance room, but we all know that a lot of our technology doesn't mesh well with the technology of the risen. So that's my long-winded way of saying that the ability to wait is perhaps something that we've been slowly losing as a human race, that we're becoming so disidentified from nature, and nature runs on very different time, and so do we, and we're bringing nature and the experience of nature into the room. So being able to tolerate discomfort and tolerate disappointment and setbacks, and when nothing happens, there's a lot of people that don't have that ability to tolerate it anymore, and that seems to be a direct effect of the technology as well.
Would you say that's a way to filter out the people that aren't really committed, or maybe there for the wrong reasons?
In what way? What would you be?
Just the amount of time and patience and commitment that it takes. Well, you can't do that with being a halfway approach.
I think they'll filter themselves out.
Yeah.
They'll just say that this is not for me. I can't tolerate this. I want instant results. I'm going to go take a course in it or something, and which is fine. However spirit leads us on the path, who knows? It can be from the divine and sublime to the totally chaotic and crazy, however it goes. But I always have faith in our spirit guardians and guides of the circle, that they're going to do the filtering in some kind of a way.
Right.
So would you say it's worth it?
August, I have to say, I really liked the opening that Stuart wrote. It really resonated with me, because all of the research I've been doing on spiritualism, that seems to be true. But I would also say that as a media ecologist, someone who studied the impact of technology on people, you're absolutely right. All of these technologies today tend to create a person that wants instant gratification, which is kind of the antithesis of what physical mediumship and developing mediumship is all about. And in one of the readings that I did recently, they said that if a person is going to develop physical mediumship, if they're going to get remuneration, it should not be like in money and fees, but it should be in some other way. And so that the financial part should be taken out of it. And what I have to say to people, I believe this very much so, that when you see physical mediumship, you have to be a very discerning critic, because I've seen some physical mediums that were just right trickery, and you could tell it wasn't real and it wasn't right, and that there are ways that you can do it. But these people were also charging lots and lots of money. Mm-hmm. And it really bothers me that our friend Shannon has had to pay all kinds of money to photograph all of these mediums, and then they go and use all of her photographs for free, which doesn't seem right to me. So there's something out of alignment here, but it's intention that is the key thing. And I think at this point in time, as spiritualism fades, we get into more afterlife communication, and I think that the afterlife groups are starting to rise to fill that need within culture to console people and to help them through death and their understanding of death. So spiritualism is being usurped by other types of things like AREI, what I think at the moment.
And from my own experience, that it's not just about skill for the gifted, but also it's an art in a way. And those of us who are artists understand that co-creative process of letting go and trusting the happy accidents that happen. But there also needs to be, however we want to say it, some kind of process, some kind of protocol, some kind of ritual, a beginning and middle and end. I've seen some physical mediumship groups that I would say were very sloppy, and kind of loosey-goosey in a way, and sometimes that works. And when I've looked at a lot of the past records of physical seances, a lot of them seem to just happen almost spontaneously. But for me, my experience is it's not something that we can easily, if at all, just switch on and off, like going into a room and turning off the light, and things will happen, although that can. So there's a great deal of experimentation that goes on, at least in my circle, because we're actually working with people who call themselves scientists, and there's a lot of scientific energy going on around that, and a lot of playfulness and experimentation and exploration. But I'm wondering, like, do you think that there needs to be tighter controls that if people, like, you're supposed to show up at the same time and try to make it a regular thing, and you don't want it to deviate too much, because the people in spirit are trying to work within certain parameters, and we kind of have to sit there and let them do their thing. That I guess what I'm trying to say is that, do you think that there's not enough, that because people want instant gratification and they're not patient, that they're trying to rush through it too fast?
Well, can I answer that partially? Because I think that part of the reason also is that within our popular culture, we don't know what physical mediumship is, and the ways in which you see it depicted in the media and on television is totally inaccurate. So, I mean, people just don't know. They don't know what the terms are. They don't know what they should be doing. That, combined with the instant gratification, creates a situation where people are doing all kinds of things, you know. And so I think it's the role of us and AREI to try to educate people on what ways are proper and which ways aren't.
It was just eradicated from history, and that's why Haggerty's work is so important. His books are just amazing. He just talks about early American physical mediumship that will just blow your mind. Like, how could this stuff have been happening? But it was happening, but there was no internet, so people didn't really dilute it in any kind of a way. And also, people didn't have all that much to do other than just work on the farm or whatever they were doing. And so, if they didn't have television or radio, they would have a home circle, and they were able to devote much more of their time to that. Now it's much harder for us to do that. I don't, in terms of Wendy's question about is it worth it, I don't see the people, from the reports of people who sat in physical mediumship circles a century ago, I don't see them looking for value of some kind or a reward of some kind, that they were looking for connection. So anyone else has something they'd like to add?
I would also add to you, and I'll go and get the name of the book and put it in the chat room, but I've been looking at a lot of the old time stuff, and all of the information from the late 1800s, beginning 1900s is all extremely relevant and very valid and great guidelines for all of us to develop circles today. So even though the information is old, it's still highly, highly valuable.
I totally agree. So I would encourage people to look at some of Riley's books. He has the only best book on Emily French, who was that wonderful physical medium of direct voice in Boston. he just wrote another book about a medium in the Midwest who was a trumpet medium, and her trumpet seances were in daylight, and they seem to be very spontaneous as well too. But if we're going to look for inspiration, at least for me, I like to look for inspiration in the past. And the past is not a dead thing to me, it's very living. And when I send out my vibes towards the mediums of the past, they respond. They're very much aware and alive, and some of them still have a great deal of interest in joining us in our endeavors.
I have a comment.
Sure, Lori.
I'm having the experience of I started a small home circle maybe 2.5 years ago, and the sitters there aren't that many. There's, it started really big, but a lot of people that came in were curious and had no idea what physical mediumship was and didn't stay. And even the 4 of us that are there are running into a lot of the problems that you were talking about, like impatience is one of the biggest ones. It's like they want action. And, sometimes things, and instead of leaving, this particular person I'm thinking of is not weeding herself out. She's trying to change the nature of the circle to accommodate what she wants.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that a little bit disturbing, because I don't want to be heavy-handed about it, but I think there's, and then we have another one who says, oh, spirit can do anything, so it really doesn't matter what we do. And I don't think that's going to work. I think we're about ready to crumble, because I don't know how to deal with that in a sort of a, velvet glove way, where, I'm not heavy-handed, but at the same time, I want to accommodate spirit as best we can possibly do it. And they don't seem to have that concept. I mean, I've read some of the older books. They thrill me. I don't know how to express how much they thrill me. Like the French Revelation I read, and I read Tom Harrison's book.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. It's like, I just want to go get inside of one of them or something. So, but I am having that disconcerting experience that you talked about with some of the members that, that I've had in my group. And I don't think it doesn't appear right now that we're going to be able to survive this.
So ego is often a problem when it raises its ugly little head.
Yeah. I mean, they don't realize it, and they don't, we haven't had very much phenomenon. So one of them knows what it is, because we went together and sat with Michael Shane. So one of them knows, but the others don't even really know. They've never had the experience. They kind of think it'd be cool, but that's about it. And so I don't know.
So that's a problem too. The instant gratification includes the wanting to be entertained.
Yeah.
And spirit can be fantastic entertainers, but there are also limitations, and where I've seen some groups where they kind of just turn the matter over to spirit, and spirit will do the weeding out in some kind of a way. They just orchestrate it, is a good word to put it. In other cases, I've been a guest at circles where the controls are very strict. And if it's sensed that there's someone who is not group ready, they're not allowed in a very gentle and compassionate way. And it's spirit that makes those decisions. And I've seen the mediums who are under the control of their guides make these decisions. And sometimes they're usually done very gently and very carefully. Mm-hmm. But it kind of puts a lot of, it sounds like it's bringing disharmony into your group. I find it useful, at least in our group, we find it useful where we sort of have, when we can, kind of a 6-month review of how are we doing, and sort of how does this feel? And there was a time where suddenly I noticed that our commitment was flagging off, that the world was taking things away from us. And I could have just let that go, but I decided, no, I've got to address this because there might be some hurt feelings about it or people take it the wrong way, but we were able to work it out. But in my case, I always invite spirit. Like, I don't think that I'm the one that has to make the decisions about who's in the group in that way.
I think that's what we're going to end up doing, is having a review of some sort. And yeah, I would really like to invite spirit as much as, you know, it sort of depends on how well people can hear spirit and how well, I mean, unless spirit just orchestrates events and such. I certainly don't want to be the person that makes those kind of decisions.
Well, is there, like, we have a kind of mission statement, which is part and parcel of our prayer, which reminds us why we're there and what our expectations are. So we always remind ourselves in that way. Do you have some kind of like a mission statement that everyone understands?
No, we don't have it. We probably should. We don't have a mission statement. What I did was I took Robin Foy's team wrote a guide for, you know, for physical mediumship, like energy based. And I took that and used it as our sort of our guidebook. And, but I'm not absolutely sure that our members have even read it. I think some of them have looked at it, but it's not that long. But I mean, it's not, you know, we have something, but I'm not sure if anyone's paying attention to it.
Maybe not. So how would you answer the question? Is it worth it?
I would, well, because personally, I think it's probably like one of the most important things in the world. So I would definitely say that it's whatever we have to deal with, or it's worth it to me personally. I don't know how other people, you know, feel about it, but to me, yes.
Right. So how would you, because when Wendy had proposed this topic, I was thinking, well, what does the word worth mean? Value, like, what is it that we're valuing? Are people valuing attention and fame and glory or money or something like that? But I'm wondering how people here would answer that. Like, what is it that you actually value about your work that you're doing that demands so much of your time and energy? What are you getting from it?
This is an interesting dialogue, what's happening here, especially with your circle. I didn't want to interrupt. My question was something completely different for August and the environment where he's sitting in New York City. But I would want to address Lori. You know, our circle, when Craig started the circle back in 2009, there were 30 people. And then that dwindled down. It dwindled down to about 9, and then 8, then 7. And then the circle completely disintegrated except for myself. And then we had to restart several times.
Yeah.
And in that time, we always had some kind of phenomena. But there were people that came in with their own agendas. And it wasn't until we created we created a protocol, which was very simple. It was sitting and singing and letting things happen. But the key was the harmony. So nobody there had any sort of, any kind of agenda, so to speak, you know? And there's really no simple answer to this other than, don't make it too complicated. It used to be that we thought there should be no mental mediumship in the physical circle. But that soon ended. When Spirit used Vicky and her clairvoyance, and at the same time was able to produce phenomena that validated the messages she was getting. So that kind of threw that out the window. So yeah, mental mediumship is a part of it, but it should never take over. It should only be for the purpose.
We have mental mediumship, and we even have, there's somebody in our group that likes to. We even have crossings a lot. And I have questions about that, whether it takes energy away from development.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if it's stating the purpose of the mission statement, in other words, like August was saying, it is for development. Spirit, like Scott Milligan says, that spirit will move wherever there is most need. So if somebody in the circle is demanding spirit's attention, it might go to that person. So it seems like spirit is very malleable when it comes to the need. But if you are all focused in harmony in the same direction, there you're going to find your progress. I wouldn't have mental mediumship in the circle. I think it would be a bad idea, except if there's validation, some sort of phenomena, objective phenomena that's a validation of that mental mediumship. Otherwise, I'd find it suspect, and I mean, not suspect, but I wouldn't see it as validating. For us,
we do have that. We have somebody that's able to, you know, a lot of times it's just sensations that they get and stuff. But I mean, yeah, we do have validation of our mental.
Is it objective validation though? Is
No.
It like, okay.
No.
So I would suggest that mental mediumship should be accompanied by some kind of objective validation, knocks, taps.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You know, like loud, you know, something that would say, yes, this is what the mental medium is getting this, and that's okay. And it's for the benefit of the circle, not necessarily for any particular member. You know, it would be for the benefit of the circle. That would be my suggestion on that. Having seen many different versions of our circle as we've progressed through the years. And it can be problematic when you have somebody coming in that wants to kind of change and run the show the way that they want it. So that's why I think August's suggestion for a mission statement is extremely wise from the very beginning.
Yeah, thanks.
Marion, do you have something to add? You've had a lot of experience with circles breaking up and restarting. Do you have something that could help Laurie?
No, what I was listening to early on, which I agreed in, it's when we have these really big mediums that goes in and take huge big congregations in to look at physical mediumship. If you go in and you have a look at that, which I have done on many occasions, to go and see mediums and how they have worked. I have also listened to the people who actually go to see this gathering. There can be up to 50 people. I don't know if people knows that. And each one of them obviously pay for that one. But half of the people, or more than half of the people, has no knowledge upon physical mediumship. They don't know what's going to happen. When you hear them speak, let's go and have some fun. That's what you think that's going to happen. Let's go and see what is going on. And when finally some of the mediums in which I have seen, what they come out with in totally darkness is a trumpet flying in the air. It is a tambourine that's there. There's absolutely, from my sense, no whatsoever evidence in anything that relates to me, to physical mediumship, for just seeing that. But of course, the people who goes to see it thinks it's absolutely fantastic when they see a trumpet. Last time I saw Stuart Alexandra, I was invited up to Hull, being with him many occasions. And one of the things I saw from Stuart, if we have to have a trumpet phenomenon, in which obviously he had a lot of in the old days, he sat this time full awake in his cabinet. And he then turned around and said, I will now try to get spirit to use a trumpet for the way that it's supposed to have been used. And it was absolutely fantastic to see the rod coming from his stomach into the trumpet, lifting the trumpet, and actually hearing voices coming out of the trumpet, rather than using it just for game, and parlor game is what I call it for. So I think a lot of things today is going wrong because people want to sit for physical mediumship. They think it's funny. They have no idea what's going on. They don't know what they're dealing with. They have no idea who the medium's going to be. So everybody suddenly wants to be a medium. I have noticed that within Scandinavia, where I do a lot of my work and my research also. So it's very, very difficult. And I will say that I also go back to the old time. I look at the old mediums. I think it's fantastic the work they did. We can never, I mean, I say we have not reached that standard in which they have back in time has been absolutely fantastic. And we are nowhere there. We are nowhere near it. I think that what happens today is so many things happening in the circle. I think that's fine. Experiments goes on and all sort of things. I think that's fine too. where's the evidence? I mean, you know, when you, in the old days, you actually had the relatives and families coming through, hugging and so forth, people who came into the home circles, including scientists and things like that also came through. That's what I think I'm looking for today, but cannot find it anywhere, sadly.
Okay, so the question is it worth it? In my position, yes, absolutely it's worth it. Is it frustrating to be sitting week in and week out and not knowing if I'm going to develop any particular way, or even if I always question, do I even have the capacity to do physical mediumship, whatever form spirit decides it wants or route it wants to take me? But I started sitting actually with the intention of just developing, and because I was told that to sit for trance, you would help your mental mediumship, which is what I do professionally to, you know, bring healing through to folks. And then we started getting some experiences, so it kind of shifted into sitting for trance and physical phenomena. And it can be very frustrating, very tough for us to meet, especially, I mean, I have 6 sitters right now. One's mom just passed, but 4 of them are taking care of parents, let alone kids. So trying to just, you know, be there every fortnight can be problematic. But it's so worth it when it happens. And we do have those nights where things happen. I just had one. The least thing I thought would have ever expected to happen did. And primarily because of need. I think somebody mentioned that before. Somebody needed it. And just having that experience makes it all worth it. That's my opinion.
That's it for me. The value is not something that is tangible in the way of material things, but it's a spiritual experience of evolution, of growth, that is not necessarily visible to anyone around me, but I can certainly sense my own growth and understanding as I relax and open up more and more to the wisdom of the universe, which Spirit wants to bring to us. They have access to us. They want us to be channels to that. So there's also my experience that we may not be seeing very many results on this side that are going to be gratifying to us, but Spirit almost has a kind of frustration on their own end because they wish that we could see what they could see. They wish that we could experience what they're experiencing. They try so very hard just to get through the dimensional disparities to try to get us to hear things, to see things. We're limited with our 5 human senses in many ways. They're not. And this work that we're doing is not, even though it may feel like it goes by quickly or it's being wasted or nothing happens, oftentimes there is a great deal happening on their side, and they are gathering this stuff. They're recording it. They're putting it into their own versions of books and stories, their own technology, that when we finally are able to leave the earth and join them, there's going to be a lot of surprises waiting for us that we actually developed and grew from our experiences here that we won't see here, but we'll see there. So the reward comes later, if you want to think of it as a reward. Anybody else, is it worth it? All this time and energy that you put into?
I'd like to just chime in a little bit here. I guess I'm one of the people who's very, very fortunate to have sat with regular circles where reunions took place, things with David Thompson. And the reunions that we had in those circles were absolutely incredible. We had, you know, people whose lives were changed. My life, Victor's and my lives were changed by that experience. I was 11 years old when my father died, And I always wondered, you know, gosh, does he still remember me? Does he still remember me? And then at the age of 65, my dad emerged, walked across the room, kissed me, told me that he knew about our marriage. He knew Victory. I asked him if Mum was with him, and he said, of course she's with me, because they were very close, and we're having a hell of a time. It was just delightful. And then he wrote his signature on a piece of paper and pressed it into my hand. Now, how can you put a price on that? That is just absolutely, and other people, so many other people have those experiences. I've put a link on the web page, samples of recent physical mediumship. There's a lovely reunion there. I'm just going to share screen and let you listen to this, and then you can tell me if it's really worth it. Which I just like to play this spirit reunion.
Yeah, I can, darling. I love you, baby. I love you so much. I love you. Don't ever leave me, okay? I know you're with me. As much time with you as I can, I'm always looking there. Okay, my baby, just stay close. I love you so much, and you know how grateful I am for you doing this. You know all those things that you thought. Yeah. And then they've gone, it was just lost. Yeah. They were lost. Yeah. Don't worry about them. Really? I knew you was there. I knew you was there. Did you, darling? Was I enough for you? I just... Listen to me. Listen to me. We haven't got long. Listen to me. Okay, my baby. Always remember. Yeah. I love you from my heart. Okay. I told you that just before I left you. I know. I'll always be with you. Always be with you. Okay, my darling. Promise me something. Yes. I want you to be happy. I will for you. Remember, whatever happens, we'll always be together or we meet again. You promise me that? I promise you. You come from my heart, I promise you. Okay, my darling. I want you to be happy. I will try. I am trying. I'm trying so hard. I just want it to be enough. That's why I died peacefully. Oh, thank goodness. That's why I had that look of peace on my face. Yes. Did you see me when I went to see you? I did. I didn't think you put me to the coffee. I saw it all. Oh, thank you, darling. I tried to do right by you. I tried to do everything I could. You done more than any man could do for one. More than any man could do for one. Okay, my baby, because you know you were worth it. You don't ever doubt how much I loved you and how much I will continue to love you. Don't ever doubt that. Well, I love you. Okay, my baby. Oh, I love you. I love you.
You okay, Sarah?
Yeah.
Good.
Well, I think that gives you some idea of the intensity of what physical mediumship at its best can do. So yes, it is worth it. It's worth if we can get mediums of that caliber. It's not about the physical phenomena. That's just the beginning of it. But when you get those life-changing, and when you get the philosophy coming directly to you, it hits you with a force. It hits you with. I'm particularly interested in getting people talking about our own growth and what we're doing, and that spiritual advice. It's just incredible. There's absolutely nothing like it.
Angie?
Yes, hi. Wow, that was very powerful, and I love what you said, Wendy, about I have no experience with physical mediumship, or very, very little on the mediumship front, period. But the spiritual development is so key on so many different levels. And I have a question for August. What have any of the risen or spirit given you any advice or suggestions on how to go forward with this?
Can you be more clear about what you mean by this?
With this whole situation that we're being confronted with the lack or the difficulty of physical mediumship and trying to find sitters, appropriate sitters and appropriate mediums, and that, have you gotten any advice from them on how to, make it more appealing? Or I don't know how to word it properly, but do you know what I mean?
There has to be the deepest of desire towards that kind of transformational expectation that Wendy is talking about, that you want your world to move forward. And so the risen say, if you show up, we'll show up. If you meet us halfway, we'll even meet you further than that. But you have to relax, open up, don't be afraid, fear or worry or anxiety. That's why in our prayer, we specifically say we leave all of our worries and anxieties and fears outside this room for now, that this is a sacred space. And so you're cultivating not just the circle, but yourself. It's a psychological growth. It's an emotional growth as well. People find themselves becoming more compassionate, more kind, and they want these things. So it's kind of somewhere in the Bible, I think it says that you just have to keep your mind centered on those things that are good and true, and Spirit will do the rest. So it just takes wanting to just to show up, basically. Maybe that's the problem, is that we have a very difficult time showing up. Our lives, we're way overwhelmed by too many stressors in 21st century right now that we weren't evolved to handle. And so anxiety is an endemic problem, for example, in mental health. Somehow we have to want to cultivate, just as the way that you would cultivate a special garden that you could go and sit in and just have some peace and quiet. The circle room should be your own little garden of Eden too, that you can go and sit with peace and quiet and commune. And some amazing things can happen, as Wendy noted.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're coming to the end of our hour. Does anybody have, I'd like to hear from those people who've also had amazing experiences in physical mediumship, something that moved them, something that transformed them. I know we've got a lot of people here. Perhaps we could just talk about those for a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
August, would you like to start? So what is something that really made a difference for you?
My case might be a little different in that I was experiencing profound physical mediumship as a child, that it was normal for people in spirit to be in my bedroom every night. My grandmother, who had died when I was 2, was there, various relatives. I was very used to having the presence of spirit people around and being touched by them and being held by them. And as a child, I hadn't yet formed a lot of the psychological defenses and skepticism and fear that adults develop later on. And all of that faded over the years, probably with puberty and life settling in. But when I finally was spirit orchestrated, it was time for me to get back into the presence of people in spirit. Immediately, it felt like I was home. I had totally forgotten what real home with a capital H felt like. That there's just, that there's something that when you are in the presence of someone who has traveled that distance to be with us, that it changes you in some kind of a way. It vibrates you in certain ways. So for me, whenever I'm in the presence of true physical mediumship, it feels like a homecoming, to me, and that's what keeps me coming back, is I always want to keep going home.
Beautiful.
I've been in 2 physical seances with Scott Milligan where relatives have come through to people in direct voice. And the first one was with my friend, she became my friend, Annette. At the time, I didn't know her, but her daughter came through. And the reunion of the 2 of them just moved everybody in the room. And there were about 30 people in the room. And then later, afterwards, the next seance that I went to with Scott, he actually brought through my father. And I have no way to describe how I felt. I mean, it was just amazing to hear his voice coming from the other side. And it's interesting that when I heard the voices on the tape that you just played, I knew it was spirit because I felt the same way, very similar way.
Yeah.
So it's indescribable.
Everybody in the room is moved to tears when you have that spirit reunion. It's like, and it's such a heart-opening experience. So, and that's what they had in the old days. They had that all the time. It was just amazing, that presence of spirit.
I had that with Leslie Flint sitting in London with Leslie when. Being in presence, I think there was about 12 or 13 people there. And what I thought was fantastic, and again was absolutely incredible, is when my father came through, Leslie, and actually spoke Danish. And Leslie, he speaks English, but he actually came out, and you heard Mickey says, "What did he say? What did he say then?" And then I had to translate what was said. And I think that really crowned my mediumship. It crowned my work. It crowned what I was looking for, because there was such a fantastic atmosphere. And also there was not one person there who could speak Danish except for myself. So that's something I treasure.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. Well, look, thank you very much, August. August has so much depth and so much beauty in his writing, in his being, in what he's able to communicate with us, that I strongly recommend his 2 books. The first one is called The Risen, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
The first one is called The Risen: Dialogues of Love, Grief, and Survival Beyond Death. And it'd take a long time to explain how it came into being. It took over 8 years to transmit through many thousands of spirit people who wanted this information to be put through. And it was done in partnership with my partner, Tim, who had transitioned in the late 90s here in New York City. And he had come through and said, "Do you want to write a book with us?" And I'm saying, "Sure," not knowing I was getting into in the next 8 years. It was quite an adventure. And so Tim is actually there writing the book with me, and we're demonstrating how love does not stop, and it actually continues and it grows. And we're having conversations throughout the book. Tim brings a lot of information to the table that was beyond my ability to even conceive. So it was a process of taking time and finding the right language, the right spiritual language to convey it. So it's kind of a bit hodgepodge to me, but it's quite well organized in various factors. I would say that it's not a book meant for newbies, or it's not like astral physics 101. Like, it's really for people who have some understanding and acceptance of what mediumship is. But I found many people who have had no experience of it, that it speaks to them in many ways. One thing that I noticed that ran throughout the book is when Spirit was trying to teach us things, that they used they used grief as sort of a thread that ran through all of it, because we can all identify with grief. And so they were able to use it as examples in terms of mediumship and evolution of self. and higher spirit. So the second book was kind of, I asked spirit, I would really, especially as a therapist, would like to have something about grief, something much more deep in depth, and they certainly delivered. So the second book is also called The Risen, but it's called A Companion to Grief. It's not like any grief books that I know, that it doesn't try to cure grief or help us get over it, but it helps us to transform the energy of grief. And so the main theory is that there's an energy to grief that is waiting there for us to connect with. And there are certain ways of connecting with grief where we can transform that energy into something higher, and that the experience of suffering and loss becomes one of joy and gain. And I'm not saying that it's easy, but it's pretty fascinating that there are a lot of spirit scientists and people who were once psychologists and psychotherapists on the planet who have contributed to it. My main job was just to transmit the information, but I also bring a lot of my own background as a psychotherapist for over 30 years into it as well. So I don't know if it's going to be helpful to people or not, but I hope so.
It's a wonderful book, August. Both of your books are unique and treasures, and I mean that quite genuinely. They are quite amazing. And they're books that when you read them slowly and they make you grow. It's an organic sort of process. So it's not something that you just sort of read quickly and put it away. It's
right. People often report going into blackouts while they're reading the book, or they fall asleep while reading a book. So it definitely they change your vibration. Not so much in like the electronic, only the first one is in a Kindle form, and people have reported to me that when they've opened it on their Kindle, it like short-circuited. So I really recommend that you get the physical book, because they're beautiful books. They're very beautifully designed and constructed, and they're made to be little art objects as well.
And August, very quickly, tell us about your publishing company. You've called Tempest in a Teapot. Is that how it works?
Mm-hmm.
Tempest?
Yeah, Tempest in a Teapot.
I just think that's an amazing name for a publishing company.
For example, Riley was having some problems getting his new books published, which I thought was just unconscionable that they have to get published. So I said, well, I will do this for you. And
one of the things we're trying to do in AREI is set up a group or committee to be resources to people who want to self-publish, so that we can give them advice, tune them into resources. Okay, this is where you go to get a decent cover. This is how you can find a good proofreader, all that kind of thing, because self-publishing is becoming
right.
viable for many people in our community.
Absolutely. Well, I do all that myself. I actually am an artist as well, so I create the covers myself, and I know all the technology behind that. And but I've learned a lot over the years about do's and don'ts, and which platforms work better than others, and what kind of interactions you get with the technologists who are on the other side of the web platforms. And I might be able to say people.
That kind of information would be invaluable to us. As you're coming to the symposium this year?
I don't know.
Okay.
I am going to be spending a fair amount of time in Lilydale around that time as well.
Okay.
That I'm going to be attending some Uweepi ceremonies of Warfield Moose.
Fair enough.
Which I'm looking forward to very much.
Susan, do you want to say a word about your event in Lilydale?
Yes, we're trying to get some people together to discuss physical mediumship, and I've put a week together that combines some of the programs at Lilydale on physical mediumship. My friend Donna Hogan Sinclair from England is coming over to do a session on technology in the seance room, and she's been working on this a lot. And there's another workshop they're doing, which I forget. Oh, there's one I'm doing too, where we're getting Shannon Taggart's going to be part of it, and I'm going to be part of it, and we're going to be showing all kinds of different physical phenomena. In addition to that, I have all kinds of events and things planned for the whole week. So I've combined it with Lilydale and with me, and it's just kind of stuff going on. And time to talk.
And while we're here, I'd like to introduce Sandy Ingham. Sandy, do you want to say a quick hello? I know you're going to Lilydale soon. Do you want to say hello to Susan? I think you'd be a great connection.
Yes. Hello, Susan.
Hi, Sandy. Neil, I think, sent my name to you. I have the Spirit Art Gallery.
I don't know, to be honest. I should explain to you all that I'm not a computer user. I have no clue what I'm doing here at all.
Okay.
So
you're doing
I
fine.
don't even know what's happening most of the time. But Lilydale, yes, I believe you'll be there, won't you, when I am?
Well, I live here.
Oh, you live? Oh, you see how little I know.
Yeah, but also you've worked with my friend Annette down in Spain.
Annette Rogers?
Yes.
Oh, I have indeed, yes.
Yes, and I'm going down there to do an art event in May.
This year?
Yes.
Oh, how lovely. Oh, I wish I could be there. I'd love to see you work.
Yeah, so when you come, we'll have to get together.
Oh, that would be lovely.
Actually, Sandy's going to be our guest next week. So Sandy's going to be talking, and I hope Susan will join us with, as I expect she will. Our topic is going to be about spirit art.
Oh, wonderful.
So it'll be a wonderful meeting, and hopefully the connection between Sandy and Susan will take off from there.
I hope so.
Oh yeah, no, I'm
that
sure.
That would be wonderful.